Hello and welcome to BBC News. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres is in Ukraine to hold talks with President Zelensky about the continued export of Ukrainian grain. Brokered by the United Nations and Turkey last July and secured with Russia, the deal enabled the shipping of Ukrainian grain from Odessa via the Black Sea through the Bosphorus Strait and Istanbul. But now the deal is up for renewal, and Russia has signalled that before it agrees to anything, it wants more done to lift curbs on its own agricultural exports. Our diplomatic correspondent James Landale is in Kyiv and explained more about Russia's position.
This grain deal that allows some grain to pass through the Black Sea from Ukraine through to the world markets is actually two agreements. One is an agreement between Ukraine and Turkey and the United Nations, and then there is a separate agreement between Russia and the United Nations and Turkey. And part of that deal with Russia was to say, yes, Russia would open up some of those ports on Ukraine's southern coast, but at the same time there was a separate sort of three-year plan for the United Nations to encourage greater access for Russian fertilizer and grains onto the world markets. And it's that area that Russia is complaining about, saying not enough has been done. Only the Ukrainian side of the deal has been upheld. And so that's why they have suggested that potentially there might be what they call obstacles to signing off on the renewal of this grain deal at the end of next week. So that's what today's negotiations about, is to discuss what Russia wants, what can be done to make sure that this deal continues, because a huge amount is at stake.
James Landale. Well, Rhiannon Phillips is an expert on the grain talks and is from the intelligence analysis company Sibylline. I asked her whether she thought another deal was likely.
I think it's definitely important to look back and have a look at, the trajectory of the conflict, whether that's having any impact on the talks that we are seeing at the moment. It's quite clear we're not seeing any sign of the conflict abating in the next couple of months, particularly kind of ahead of spring. And so, what we're seeing at the moment is quite a similar narrative to what we saw even back in November when all parties tried to get this renewal again. And so we are seeing quite a similar sort of narrative from all camps, noting that there are things to be done, there are obstacles, etc. I think one element that's really important to look at that potentially is quite different this time is that we are seeing Russia step up quite a hostile narrative in the weeks ahead of the potential renewal on the 18th of March. Something we've not seen before. Obviously, we've seen their demands for concessions around the fertilizer exports, etc. But we are seeing quite, notable allegations coming from Russia saying that Ukraine is actually using these Black Sea ports to import what Russia claims are nuclear material, specifically californium. And so this is, very different. This is quite a notable narrative. They're claiming Odessa ports and specifically Chernomorsk as well, utilizing these ports to kind of bypass these customs. And effectively what they're saying, bottom line is the narrative is that, Ukraine is utilizing this Black Sea grain deal initiative to further their kind of camp or efforts for nuclear bioterrorism. And this is really something, this is important. This is really something we might see Russia use to kind of scupper this deal. It's worth noting that, Russia's position in the Black Sea is not necessarily as strong as people think. And so the question we've got to ask ourselves is, will they really be able to strong-arm these parties? Will they be able to strong-arm, Turkey, UN, really quite a strong force? And will the UN effectively call Moscow's bluff again, as they did last time?
So how much grain is currently leaving the ports?
Yeah, so there's been kind of significant delays at the ports, and this has been increasing over the past 3 months. Effectively, what we've seen statistics are showing that anything between kind of 20 to 22 million tons of grain have been exported since back in July when the first kind of iteration was ratified. These have been disputed, these statistics. It's quite hard to know kind of specific statistics, but it is significant to note that there have been significant delays, in the ramp up to this possible renewal. And we have seen a diversification of markets, international markets, trying to, diversify really since the conflict started to try and cushion the blow of these delays. But ultimately, it's not enough, and there's going to need to be a lot more grain exported from these ports to kind of to make up for this, in fact.